Black Myth Wukong, the full game on the Steam Deck. Thanks to Game Science for providing a code. At the moment, it doesn't have a Steam Deck compatibility thing. I'm guessing Valve is trying to actually play the game a little bit longer. But I experimented yesterday live with you guys. You can follow that in the description if you want to check it out. Me trying basically all the settings. The best settings in my opinion are 800p, TSR 65%. This will be like quality FSR, to say it in some way. Frame gen, we're going to enable it later. And basically the settings are everything on low, except in shadows, which are on medium. Otherwise shadows are missing, at least on the character and some of the environments. Textures on medium and the rest on the lowest. So let's get into it right away. Welcome to Wukong. So here we are. As you can see, the frame rate is hovering over 30, but it likes to drop below 30 in certain scenarios, such as traversal. So what would I recommend in this case? Lock it to 30 FPS, at least in my opinion, that's the best way to do it in this case. What's the advantage of having shadows on medium? Well, in here, if shadows were on low, you wouldn't have any shadows to speak of. They're completely missing. I think this is a good balance. So, before going any further, lock it to 30 right here. You should be good to go. There will be more latency, obviously, but you make the CPU and GPU not suffer as much, especially when traversing through areas like here. When there's traversal, the CPU spikes in usage, and that's because it's loading the next area. So here, for example, there the CPU usage increases quite significantly, but then it stabilizes because it loaded the area. And then when it comes to upscaling, I'm using TSR because in motion I think it looks better than FSR. FSR does look better in water surfaces. So water surfaces with TSR looks a little bit pixelated, to say it in some way, especially when it comes to those minor reflections. But if you look at it in certain angles, you'll see that the water has like squares onto it. Looks like macro blocking in a video, to say it in some way, to explain it to you better. But in general, when there's a lot of motion on screen, like moving this, it's way better on TSR than on FSR. Then when it comes to XeSS, I thought it was a little bit too blurry. But if you don't mind the game being a bit blurrier, it's also a good option. Personally, again, I think TSR is the best of both worlds. These two items. But again, we're playing Wukong on a handheld. I just recommend, again, the shadows to be on medium so you don't lose them completely. And the game actually looks pretty good with these settings, at least in my opinion. Of course, you're doing sacrifices, and now I'm doing this mini boss fight just to show you how it goes in a demanding scene. I'm also going to be showing you the wolf, because the wolf is pretty demanding. But as you can see, we're fine. Whoa. So yeah, fire on screen plus boss seems to be fine. And I died for some reason. Okay, so I'm back in this temple. If I'm running this way, you have the boss with a lot of fur. So hair is on low. That means that the hair is not going to have highlights around it when there is the sun. So if you look at them side by side, you're going to notice the drop in visual fidelity when it comes to the hair. Which again, considering we're playing on a portable machine, I mean, it's a sacrifice that needs to be made. But the closer you get to this big enemy, the more strands of hair, or fur, better said, that show up, the more difficult it is for the GPU to render all that. But doing it like this, the worst it gets is 28. especially when you're getting hit very close to the camera. So yeah, this is where it hurts the most, to say it in some way. So again, I think it's not worth keeping shadows on low, otherwise the enemy and you do not have any shadows to speak of. But the game, in my opinion, still looks good. Of course, you gotta do sacrifices because we're on a portable machine. Alright, I think it's time to show you how it looks on the smaller screen, because I think using a capture card you can see all the flaws, and the flaws are a little bit less noticeable when looking at the smaller screen, so let's do that. Alright, so now in the smaller screen you can probably notice that there's black bars at the top and bottom of the screen. That's because the game is 16:9 or 21:9. You have those options, but 16:10, I hope they add it in a future patch. It would be cool to have the entire screen, especially noticeable on the Steam Deck LCD. On the OLED, it's completely fine. So we're still getting that frame rate, but on the smaller screen it really is way less noticeable. The lower resolution, obviously, because you don't have your face like this on the screen. But many of you asked me for frame generation, so I'm going to give you that right now. So we enable frame generation. And as you can see, with frame generation, we get a higher frame rate. You get more latency, obviously, that's to be expected, but you get a way higher frame rate because it's making a fake frame in between frames. And the frame time looks like that because I'm guessing that with frame generation, Mango Hood says that there is stuttering. I'm not entirely sure, but I mean, it feels fine. Although the base frame rate is so low that it's pretty obvious when playing that there is input lag. So if you don't mind the extra input lag, or maybe you never played the game, you're launching the game for the first time, you can use the frame generation. Well, it works pretty well. Again, there is input lag. I'm pretty sensitive to input lag, so you might not notice it, especially if you launch the game for the first time, again. But hey, the option is there if you want to use it. Yeah, the input lag, I can notice it right away. But again, I'm pretty sensitive to that sort of stuff. Remember that my channel is about looking at frame rates, looking at resolution, settings. So I'm a special person when it comes to that. I notice those things right away. But the option is there if you want to use it. Although, yeah, when the frame rate drops, you notice it more because it's generating fake frames there. Yeah, when it drops a tiny bit below 30, you just see like a rougher drop. So again, does it work? Yes, it does. You have optionally frame generation. Let's see how that works with a bigger enemy with lots of hair. And why didn't I crank up the settings now that we have room to spare, quote unquote? Because the real frame rate is still 30 FPS. That's why. If I increase the frame rate, it will look choppier, to say it in some way, if I increase the frame rate. If I increase the settings... So I think the best way to play it, it's without frame gen, locking it to 30. But hey, frame generation is there if you want to use it. So again, settings showed before. Go here and log it to 30. When it comes to latency on the OLED, it's better than the LCD deck. But there you go. 30 FPS. There's upscaling, obviously, but on the smaller screen, it's not as noticeable. We're playing on a handheld with 4 cores and 8 threads. A UE5 game. I want you to keep that in mind for a second. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with how it works, actually. After playing it a little bit more and seeing what each setting does, just keeping shadows on medium and textures on medium makes the game look good enough without sacrificing the shadows, without sacrificing most of the good visuals. Again, nowadays Low settings looks okay in comparison to before. I would say medium settings is the best. I wish we could increase that hair quality, that would be nice. One so good. But yeah, we're playing on a Steam Deck. I wish there was again a 16:10 update so we can use the entire screen, but otherwise, if you are fine with a 30 FPS lock, you should be good. Then when it comes to the game itself, I'm enjoying it quite a bit actually. I already beat the wolf, but I reloaded that save file in order to be able to show it off to you, because that's where I drop frames the most. But overall, I'll say it's playable, looks pretty good still. Just again, shadows, keep them on medium. Don't bother with low shadows. Shadows are basically missing from many things, even your own character. When it comes to cinematics, it's going to drop below 30, that's impossible not to happen. The cinematics are pretty demanding, which makes sense, you're not actually controlling the game there. So let's do the first boss fight, which is the minute 0 of the game.
And that black mutt of yours. Come at me, all of you.
But on the small screen, really, I can see the artifacts on the effects. But I mean, it's 30 FPS outside of cutscenes. And there's a lot of enemies in the background there, which are not fighting us. I'm guessing this 9-eyed UE5 feature. Very interesting. And if I spawn more of myself, I clone myself, it's probably going to drop there. Yep. If I put more monkeys fighting the enemy, it drops into the upper 20s. But when you do it in the game itself, it's been fine for me. This is because they're moving and there's effects here. Yeah, the effects have some artifacting. What a badass way to start the game. So yeah, Wukong on the Steam Deck. I mean, considering it's a UE5 game, I think if you are fine with playing at 30 FPS, you should be good to go. You're going to see some artifacting on hair and effects. But with medium shadows, I think you're good to go with everything on low except in shadows and textures. You get like 2 hours of battery on the OLED. I'm guessing on the LCD it will be more like 1.5 hours, considering the power usage. So yeah. Is it playable? Yes, but it requires a very tiny bit of tweaking when it comes to settings to make it look still good enough. Otherwise, if we're playing on the lowest, it looks like a PlayStation 2 game sometimes. Nah, I'm kidding. More of a PS3 game. So yeah. That's been Wukong. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did playing it again. And well, I'm going to keep playing it. If I run into more of a demanding stage, I'll make another video, but I'm guessing this is a good way to leave it. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye guys.